And welcome to the Pacific Catch post-game show. Light years here. The Warriors beat the Toronto Raptors 129-117. Sitting in for Andy Liu, I got Aaron Larsoul. I feel like all around, that was a fun Warriors game. A lot of interesting things that happened, but all things considered, Friday night, get the win, 2 in a row, entering a big various sports weekend. Can't really complain on the aggregate.
Absolutely not. No, it was fun. And it seemed like a better idea for me to come and hang out with you on light years than to venture out into the Los Angeles evening. So let's get it. It was fun though. It was fun hanging out. I'm laid up pretty good. My knees busted up, so I was hanging out on the couch. But it was a fun game. And anytime Steph has his moments where he gets going like that, is always. I don't think there's any better show in basketball than that.
There is not any better show. Let's start with the main man, Steph Curry. Casual 35, 11, and 7. Only 8 3-point attempts, which might as well be 0, given how he plays basketball. I feel like you can always count on the Raptors to try something different against the Warriors.
Yep.
And tonight was no different. They overshaded Steph, and he just layups all game. Just looking at the numbers right now, 9 for 13 on 2-pointers, 5 for 5 on free throws. He just got to the rim whenever he wanted. In my opinion, set the tempo for the game for the Warriors.
Yeah, especially early. I think he had 17 maybe in the first quarter. But
And
especially
maybe 1 3-point attempt at that point.
yeah, and which is interesting. And the Warriors were launching early. I mean, that's who the Warriors are, but also because the Raptors are, I don't know, Kalena said this on the broadcast, I think 28th in 3-point field goal percentage allowed. Some of that is luck, but as you mentioned, I said this on Twitter, Nick Nurse, and we saw it obviously in the finals against the Warriors. He's the king of the junk defense. And it was just a parade of wide open threes and layups and dunks for the Warriors, especially in the first quarter. And I said on Twitter, it looked like for a team that is as well versed in junk defenses as anybody in the league, they were guarding, quote unquote, the Raptors like they had just met this morning at shoot around. The communication was terrible. It was, I mean, they were awful. I didn't think, I mean, the Warriors looked great offensively throughout the night, especially, the late 3-point surge from Kuminga. But I think, frankly, it had a lot more to do with the Raptors defense was just awful all night.
By the way, shout out to my guy Mike Mikas for hosting today on playback. Warriors undefeated when Mikas hosts. We might have to test that streak.
You're gonna run that back.
Mikas hosting one of the next 2 games, so we'll keep that going. If you guys want to watch Warrior games with the Light Years Goons, hit up the Light Years profile. You get the link. We're watching every game rest of the way. It'll be a good time. Okay, you mentioned Kuminga. To me, Kuminga is the story of this game. For me, Kuminga has always been the highest upside prospect on the Warriors and definitely the one who's broken through most for them. The athleticism jumps, the defensive potential has shown more often than not this season, particularly at point of attack defense. Tonight, he started hitting 3-pointers, 4 for 6 from 3. Now, I'm not counting on that the whole way forward, but his ability to hit an open shot is what's going to make it possible for him to play 25 minutes in a playoff game. Because I think he can defend at a playoff level. And I think I think he has a mindset to play playoff basketball. Like, he's going to make young guy mistakes, but he's, do I need to pull it up right now? Get the X-ray with dogs in the chest?
Like, with the dog in the chest.
He's my thing with him is he's going to make mistakes, but he's got elite competitive attributes and elite physical attributes to play at that level. And my question's always been, will the shot come around? Tonight it did. And you know what? Like, he, to me, is the key for this Warriors team in many ways.
Which is somewhat scary, but I don't disagree with you. And you and I have gone back and forth about this, that I think his handle, bettering his handle is more important than the jumper as far as his long-term development. But I think today for Kuminga, or tonight for Kuminga, was kind of a microcosm of the I mean, of his career, but
Mhm.
also the Warriors' high potential rookie,
Mhm.
just that whole experience, because he was absolutely awful in the first half. And the reason he looked awful in the first half was because he had reverted back to overthinking and second guessing himself. All of the stuff that the negatives of the Coach Kerr, young
Al-
guy experience.
Also, Toronto kind of played a playoff defense on him. Like you can count on Nick Nurse to come up with a game plan versus everyone. His
Mhm.
game plan versus Kuminga was the obvious one. Shoot it,
Yeah, go
bro.
ahead.
Like
Yeah.
we're gonna sag off you in
And the
the way
first two
that
were off.
team,
His first two attempts looked awful.
but they sagged off him in a
Yeah.
way that teams only do in the playoffs. Like teams
Yes.
don't throw that stuff at guys like Kuminga in a January 27th game. That's
But
something you see in the playoffs.
you are absolutely right. Look, we can go back and forth about, and we'll talk maybe about Wiseman later, but about who has more potential, Wiseman or Kuminga. But certainly Kuminga is
Mm.
much closer to realizing it and looks like he should be a rotation guy and even can possibly close some games, maybe in the playoffs even. Because he is the one guy that just does that thing that nobody else can do. He puts pressure on the rim. He leverages his athleticism, which is elite even compared to NBA players. And he looks most willing to be the guy, like TK talks about this all the time. The guys that just go get buckets, playoff bucket, go get that difficult
Yeah.
too. Wiggins, when he's right, can. Steph can get to the rim, but that's a different thing. Clay takes those terrible mid
You want a guy
rangers.
who's at least wing size, if not bigger,
Yes.
who can just get you an easy bucket when things get tough. Just
Yeah, and I don't.
give me 2 points, give me 4 points here.
What game was it? I I want to say it was the Charlotte game at home, where there was just a stretch down like
Oh yeah,
post
it was
game, and that
Charlotte where he just took over
he just took
defensively,
over.
got a
I think
couple.
he
Yeah,
just took the ball
it
from
was a
Hayward,
physical takeover.
and then
It was like
there
a
was
Jimmy Butler or a
right.
Jalen Brown type of thing. Like it wasn't pretty. But it was just like
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna assert myself physically
And
on you.
offensively, the Warriors had nothing going.
Yeah.
It was late clock. I think they hadn't scored in like 3 or 4 minutes. Charlotte had clawed their way back into the game, and Kuminga was able to get the ball baseline, maybe 15 feet out, kind of bump a guy off him and just hit like, a little floater from maybe it was 8 or 10 feet out along the baseline, which is the kind of baskets that you need to get, because during the playoffs, especially later on in series, when teams are more used to playing the Warriors who do something different. I always say they run like it's like a triple option in college, right?
Right.
It's hard to play the Warriors in the regular season because nobody else plays like the Warriors play.
Sure.
But you can get more used to it in later in the playoffs once you've played them a few times, once you've seen it a bit. So, some of the dribble handoff, fake dribble handoff stuff, keeper stuff from Draymond, or the screens where two guys run at Steph and you get a little slip for a layup. The Warriors have always feasted in the paint. This year, that's not the case. But when that kind of stuff is more difficult or goes away entirely in the playoffs, you need guys that can get those tough twos, like Kuminga has shown an ability to do.
Just
Yeah,
force
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Shout out our guy Corey Maggette back in the day. Never
It was
played
the
those
single
games.
greatest travel in NBA history. There's a
Yeah,
YouTube
exactly.
clip. It takes like 7. He switches his pivot foot 7 times and doesn't get called for it, I don't think.
All right, so I have a take for you on Kuminga.
All right, let's go.
I do not believe the Warriors are going to make a meaningful trade at the deadline
to
add talent to this team.
I agree with that.
It could happen, but just based on the market, it doesn't seem likely. So I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to determine their playoff upside. And I don't mean that in the sense of he needs to develop into becoming Jimmy Butler.
Mm-hmm.
I mean in the sense of we know who the starting lineup is. We know who Jordan Poole is. I feel pretty confident that I know who Donte DiVincenzo is. Jonathan Kuminga is that larger wing who can defend multiple positions, who can provide some athleticism that this team is currently lacking. The player that they got from GP2 and Otto Porter last year, maybe it's a lot to ask from him to fill both those roles, but that's what's going to determine this team's ceiling going into the playoffs.
So just on one part about that, I think Donte fills that somewhat because his hands are so, a couple games ago or a couple weeks ago, actually, him just ripping the ball from Dame late. He did that a couple times tonight. But I do think, especially without Wiggins, I do think that Kuminga is probably the best option on those nuclear, quick, on Jaw, on Dame kind of guys. My only pushback on your thought that he determines the playoff upside, I don't disagree with you, but I'm not sure. I guess it's not a disagreement, it's a question. Do you think he'll be given the opportunity? Do you think Steve will play him enough for him to be able to determine everything?
I think so. Here's my feeling. It feels like he is. So we've been analogizing. Wow, making analogies of the season relative to the 2020-2021 season. Everyone's favorite Kelly Oubre, Brad Wanamaker season. And that season was very frustrating. But one good thing that came from it was Jordan Poole establishing himself in the second half of the season. And Jordan Poole actually played pretty well in the play-in games.
He did.
He punched above his weight. And
speaking of analogies, what an interesting one to use in relation to JP. He was trying to punch above his weight in preseason. Look what happened.
I mean, I'm always gonna appreciate his competitive fire. I'll be honest with you there. He's like I can never dislike a guy like that. But what I was gonna say is Kuminga to me is the Jordan Poole of this season, where he may have not started the season in the rotation. We may have had questions why Steve Kerr didn't like him or didn't play him or all that stuff. But his development changes the trajectory of the season. Look, Steph Curry's he's first ballot. He's as proven as it gets. I know what I'm getting from him.
Yeah, he's also playing still at that level.
Yeah, I also know what I'm getting from Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, not on the same talent level, Looney, and to a degree Wiggins too. I know what I'm getting from those guys. Kuminga is the guy who changes the equation in one way or another, and it's unfair because he's 20 and he's in year 2. And like, he shouldn't have those expectations, but like he is kind of the X factor to this whole thing, because you got to assume come April, Andrew Wiggins is going to be healthy. And he's had a really kind of crappy 6 to 8 weeks. He had an amazing start to the season, but kind of crappy. Klay Thompson, I know he's going to leave it on the floor. Draymond, same thing. Like those guys, I know we're searching for those ancillary players who will take the team to another level to determine if this is going to be a 5 or 6 man team where let's see if Steph, Draymond, and those guys can play 48 minutes a game for 3 months, which they can't. And it's unrealistic to ask basically anyone to. Or if they can get other contributions and they can become more of an 8-9 man rotation.
So when you were talking about the comparison to Poole's development in the 2021 season, I actually think maybe the analogy for Kuminga, and I think the one you're making is a good one, but I think I might shift it to Jordan Poole last year, because right before the playoffs, when Steph was out, he went nuclear. And it was more expected because he had a good finish to the previous season. So there was some buzz on JP going into last year.
Like we were talking about him. We were a little ready for it. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe that is, and to be fair, it's not a great comparison because Kuminga was also hurt for a fair amount of this time. But I'm wondering if, and frankly, even when Wiggins was out, he didn't play. Kuminga, in my opinion, didn't play enough when he was healthy. But maybe it is like the Steph absence at the end of 2 seasons ago last season kind of forced Steve Kerr to really let JP do his thing. And I'm wondering if, Kuminga had started ascending before this, but maybe the Wiggins absence has kind of forced Kerr into playing Kuminga more than he wanted to, and continues to. And so maybe that's the comparison.
Personally, it's frustrating me because I want to see the two of them together, because in my opinion, the core 3, the legends plus Wiggins and Kuminga presents the potential of the best lineup. Doesn't mean it will be the best lineup,
right?
But like 2 hyper athletic 6'8" wings around the core guys is like kind of what I want on paper.
Yeah.
And Wiggins obviously in his prime, proven, certified, like, Warrior fans love him. Kuminga presents like another version of that in some ways, and they're different. Kuminga is far more aggressive, not the shooter though.
Yeah,
but it's like you see conceptually that could be it. But I have a stat for you, which is like they have played a whopping 61 minutes together, Wiggins and Kuminga, this season, which kind of speaks to the frustration, which is I just want to see it. I just want to see it.
Do you have? I'm gonna look. If you don't have it, do you have what their net rating is?
It's awful. But it's 61 minutes.
Yeah,
and let's walk through the background on it. The beginning of the season, Kuminga was out of the rotation. The stories have been out there, but like he, too cocky in preseason, wasn't defending, whatever it may be, right? Whatever it is, the coaching staff was correct because they got the most out of him now. And if it costs him a few games, so be it. Right. The minute Kuminga broke into the rotation, Wiggins got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And then the minute Wiggins came back from injury, Kuminga got hurt.
Right.
And we were just getting ready to see both of them. And then now Wiggins is sick. So it's like kind of, what are you going to really do with that? It's like at some point you just got to throw your hands in the air and be like, all right, sometimes bad luck happens. We got 33 games, but it is kind of the thing I'm most interested in seeing, these final 33 games. How does that lineup look together? Because that feels like a Warriors lineup. That feels like conceptually what we expect from the Warriors with their small ball lineup. And honestly, like we'll talk about Donte in a minute, but it's something they haven't been able to get to because they've been too small. Yeah. It's too many 6'3" guys, to be honest.
So you mentioned Kelly Oubre, who is not a well thought of name around these parts, but it does remind me Oubre and Wiggins playing together. The reason I liked it so much, and you and I talked about this at the time, was because they were both good defensive players, especially on the ball, but gave different looks, right? Wiggins is kind of just more steady, stay in front of you, just make life difficult for you. And Oubre was more of a guy that would take chances, get steals, and was more disruptive. So I'm wondering if Kuminga can kind of field that role where Wiggins is the more steady, just make life tough. And then Kuminga's the guy that can really put pressure on you athletically and get some explosive defensive plays out of it.
I mean, that's kind of how I see it because Wiggins is a vet. He understands the nuances of defense. It's more likely he's going to be able to kind of like guard the weak side and be that guy. Whereas like Kuminga at this point, like, it's unfair to ask him to do some of those things. It's more like, let's utilize his athleticism as a weapon to make ball handlers uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's why you want him on the ball. You have to think less if you're on the ball. Just
exactly.
Go stay in front of that dude. Make his
honestly,
life miserable.
He's a good on ball. Like he doesn't foul. He's got really good reflexes. So it makes total sense. Anyway, that's something I'm excited to see going forward. I mentioned it. We haven't talked about Donte. It's been almost 20 minutes. We got some stuff to get to, but Donte DiVincenzo, double tonight, 11
Career
assists,
high,
12 points. You mentioned his hands defensively. I mean, is there not a player who feels more meant to play in the Warriors system than Donte? Like, it's just absolutely necessary, by the way, for them too, because like sometimes it's felt this season that they miss that Iguodala type guy who just connects everything. Mm-hmm. And Donte has filled that role perfectly while doing other stuff for them too.
Yeah, and I also really liked, and you can tell because the guy said early in the season, maybe it was preseason, that he felt like a Warriors guy, and they wanted, the Steph and Clay and Wiggins and Draymond wanted Donte out there with him because he just does stuff. He gets it right. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to play. And so I was also really impressed. Yes, I mean, like all that you said about him on the court, but he was also mic'd up, and I was very impressed because it shows that he feels comfortable leading and has the trust of everybody to lead. I was really impressed with how he was talking to Wiseman and coaching Wiseman up on the bench. I thought that was a positive thing too. So it seems like all of that
2026, baby.
All of that, yeah, exactly. In 2031, you're gonna have to dunk that or lay that up, or if you have four guys on you, then you pass it out. You make the easy way. But yeah, so all of that just speaks to how quickly he has integrated himself and ingratiated himself with, the Warriors culture. And you're right, he just feels like he fits.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, we got super chat here from Awesome.
All
Sam
right.
not playing his employees. Looney 4 fouls in the second. Kerr doesn't even think to play James. Just trade him. Thoughts on the Slater article? Ooh, we're getting spicy already. So Andy and I talked about the Slater article on the last pod. So we encourage you to go and listen to that if you want thoughts on that specific topic. But I'm not going to ignore the fact that Looney was in foul trouble and we have 2 straight Wiseman DNPs.
Right.
Steve, at this point, how many different ways does he have to indirectly say it without saying it? He doesn't think he can help the team.
Correct.
He thinks he's too far away.
Correct.
Steve Kerr, help me get into the mindset of a coach like Steve Kerr. We are in game 49. We're 50 games into the season, basically. Mm-hmm. It's been a disappointing
10 games under where we think we should be.
Exactly. Disappointing season at minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And it's go time. Is the perspective just as simple as this? Look, man, I'm trying to win games. I'm trying to defend the crown. I don't have time for any of this anymore.
Yeah, so Steve, like, what, a 9.6 now or something right now? Now Steve's chasing wins? Okay, cool.
Just Steve XP. We're
Steve Vista. Look, I don't think it's that. I agree with you that that's what Steve's doing. I don't think it's that complicated anymore, though. He should, if he was ever going to play, today would be the day. Looney had 4 fouls in the first half. JaMychal Green has been awful all season. He's just back. He wasn't any good tonight either. It wasn't like he was destroying people. So if Wiseman was ever going to play, tonight would be the night. He didn't. They're also not going to trade him. So if that's the case, why not? You think Joey Lightyears is trading him?
It's just, you're ruining Christmas for a child right now.
So okay, the assumption
we don't
around
know
the
that.
league. We don't know that.
We do not know that. We still have like 12 days.
Okay,
till that.
So the assumption around the league,
I'm like completely lying to myself. This is amazing.
The assumption around the league, how about that? Is that the Warriors are not really willing to trade them unless it's something that they have no choice.
Yes.
And they will not be making the call; they will be receiving the calls. So all of that said,
when Masai calls and says Scotty Barnes for Wiseman.
Sounds good.
Then
maybe you
Joey
will
be...
throw in some draft picks too.
Yeah, exactly.
So if all of that is the case, and he's not going to play today, when they gave up 1 million points in the paint, and nobody else on the Warriors was guarding either, so it's not like James would have stuck out as a sore thumb as the only guy who wasn't guarding. Send him back to the G League. What is the point? Send him to the G League then, because Baldwin wasn't there. Baldwin's probably ahead of him in the rotation as a big guy. Baldwin wasn't there. Send him to the G League then. What are we hoping to accomplish sitting him in? If he's not going to play today, then he's not going to play. What's the point?
I agree with you on that front, which is like, okay, I don't think Steve's wrong for not playing him. Like he's just not ready. But he's not benefiting from sitting on the bench. Like at one point in the first quarter, friend of the show, Kareth Burke, tweeted, "Is Wiseman coming in?"
Oh, yeah,
he's on the exercise bike.
Right, yeah.
And
no,
I understand.
He hasn't got any physical activity in 2
months.
months.
But I understand why she
get some cardio in.
I understand why she thought that. It's like, get loose. No one goes on the bike mid-game if it's not to get loose to go in the game, except, So it's like one of those things where it's like, if he's not going to play in one scenario, it's like, make a decision here. But I feel like we're just going to have to deal with this through trade deadline season, because while I do not believe they're going to move him, and the expectation is not that they're going to move him, we do not know if they will not move him for the next week and a half, 2 weeks. Sure. So we got to play this charade, right? And that's
precisely. Yeah, precisely. I just like it right now doesn't feel like there's a plan. That's the part that, like, I pick a direction. I don't care what the direction is, but
I do agree with you, and that is my number one frustration with the whole
same
situation.
thing with Moody, by the way.
Steph, Moody, by the way, dominated the G League today.
Oh, he was there too?
Dominated. They sent him down today.
I was Rollins.
I'm gonna pull up his stats. Moody, 36 minutes, 26 points, 7 rebounds, 9 for 16, 26 from the field. Okay, so maybe not dominated. I take that back.
Maybe he was dominant in his last when he was down there before. He was. I mean,
he's at this point. You used to call Jordan Poole a 4A player.
I did. Yeah, shout out.
And
Tommy.
Moses Moody's currently a 4A player.
Correct.
So,
I mean, is he though?
I think he can.
He started games in the Western Conference Finals last year, or maybe it was the semifinals.
Is he worse than Max Christie on the Lakers, or is he just a player who has not been given 15 minutes a game every game for a consistent period?
Worse than Max Christie? I don't know, but
I don't think he is.
Probably not. But to be fair, the Warriors roster is better than the Lakers roster.
That's my point. That's my point. If Moses Moody was getting a comfortable run where he's not terrified that the minute he makes a mistake he's going to get pulled, he probably settles in. I mean, he shoots at an NBA level. That's not a question.
He does. The problem is he does that Jeremy Lin thing where he just dribbles into the paint and gets lost and has nothing to do with it and gets stuck.
That's true. That's true. Anyway, that's enough Moses Moody talk for today. But the point stands. You know, it's like it's tough.
Okay, so there's the question though. Why send Moody if you're not going to send Wiseman?
That's fair. You know, they needed big men, even though Steve said they don't, even though he said they did. So anyway,
third big man, Andre Iguodala.
We have a quote from Steve, which is going to take precedent over this. Okay. That on Jonathan Kuminga, that corner three is a big shot for him. I think it's an effective weapon for him. I thought that was a big swing in the game when he made 3 or 4 of those in a row. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it, but I do think Kuminga is defined by his ability to just stick an outside shot. I don't need him to be a shooter. I need him to hit the shot when they disrespect him on defense. Does that make sense?
Like, it does, because if you're going to stand out there and they don't care at all, I don't think there's much difference between a 34% three-point shooter and a 37% three-point shooter.
Exactly.
But if you're going to stand out there and they don't care at all, that gums up the works. Or if you stand out there and won't shoot it, it gums up the works. As long as you're willing to shoot it and the defense at least has to keep one eye on you out there, then yes, I agree with that.
I do too. And I think that's a big thing for him because his shot's a work in progress, and it's going to be a work in progress for a couple of years. But like his ability to just stick an open shot is the type of thing that forces a defense to maybe guard him. And the next thing you know, like, I mean, his athleticism to the ring is just
and if he becomes not even like a feared three-point shooter, but a dangerous three-point shooter, imagine what he can do if his handle is decent attacking closeouts, if guys have to try to at least soft close on him.
I don't even think he needs his handle that great given his first step. But like your point stands. Like, I mean, that's the thing that's exciting about a player like him. Like, it's like because the frame, the first step, and the feel, like you get giddy. Like,
there's nothing off the table as it relates.
You think all the possibilities are just exciting, and it's like, I mean, it's a wings league, and he's a prototypical wing. He's got prototypical wing measurements and everything, and so, you know, he's an exciting player for the Warriors. Tim, I think it's time. We get to the goons.
Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Martin calling in from down here in LA. Just wrapped up this Raptors game. I guess my overall feeling right now, I just want to say is that obviously we got some roster issues. We need to make a few changes, probably get Anthony Lamb off the team. Jermichael I'd be down to get rid of. But it kind of still feels like, even as currently constructed, the core, if we're locked in and we're healthy, I think we're fine. I think that's what's most frustrating, is that all these losses seem to be more like mental focus related and just not locking in all the way. So it feels like tonight is the perfect example of when the core is there. We didn't even have Wiggins. But if the core is there, if they're healthy, if they're engaged.
I feel okay. I appreciate the call, my man. Larso, let me ask you this. Okay. So my personal feeling is if you're playing a 1 of 1, I feel pretty comfortable with this roster because you can ride the core to get a win. My concern has always been the long haul, and let's not pretend the playoffs are not a grind. 2+ months, 16 wins. It's a long period of time. And so how do you feel if the playoffs start today with this roster?
I think the Warriors are the favorites in the West. I wouldn't say that they're the favorites to win the whole thing, but I think they're the favorites in the West. And that is largely because I don't think the Warriors should be afraid of anybody in the West. Memphis is a fraud.
You're good in the West? You're good in the West?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of Memphis is a fraud. Denver, I think is better than the Warriors, but I don't think Denver can beat the Warriors.
That's just a bad matchup for them because like as good as I feel like Denver can destroy most everyone in the West, but then Steph calls for the ball 30 feet out, and Jokic is just it's rough.
So I think the key to the Warriors, and I agree about the core and being able to beat anyone. The problem for the Warriors is they just don't guard anybody, and that includes the core. And if you don't guard anybody night to night, and the Warriors do not, that opens up much more variance in games, and that means the Warriors can lose to anybody too. If the Warriors are going to guard at this level, they're not. Is there a switch? Maybe. Draymond is still Draymond. Is there a switch? Maybe. But if the Warriors are going to guard like this, they're not going to win anything. And there is not much precedent for a middle of the road defense. I think they're 15th or 16th, 17th, somewhere in there now. Those teams just don't win. Yeah. Now there is look, kind of like when is LeBron going to fall off? Like predicting that downfall is a fool's errand. I think there's some of that with the Warriors too, right? Like predicting the Warriors don't have that switch to flip. It's probably a fool's errand. I'll believe the Warriors can't beat everybody in the West when it happens. Yeah. But there is no precedent for this.
I agree. All right. We got Steve Kerr here. Let's play this real quick.
Okay.
Kevon Looney in foul trouble, and as you cycle through a few players at the 5, how come James Wiseman wasn't a part of that cycle?
We just decided to go with JaMychal. We thought about going with Wise, but JaMychal's been playing well in the last few games, and so we gave him those minutes. But James could find himself out there next game. It's just day to day, and he's just got to stay ready, which he will.
Poor Steve. I mean, I give Steve a hard time, but poor Steve. What's he supposed to say?
No, I mean he's a pro's pro. He has a top 3 coach's salary for a reason. He knows how to handle these uncomfortable conversations. Maybe Bob should have a top 3 GM salary also for having to deal with some of this. But that's a different conversation. Some people think he does. Some people think he doesn't.
Steve is pretty conservative about fouls too. So when Looney had 3 in the first half and didn't come out, like the jig was up.
Yeah, I think part of that was he's also he knows Loon's only going to play 22 minutes. So, like, if a guy's not going to be a 40-minute player, he could stretch it a little bit.
I mean, I say stretch it anyway, but that's not generally how Steve is.
True.
I stretch it for anybody. Like, I think that is a flaw in coaching, right? The minutes in the first half count as much as the minutes in the fourth quarter. Who cares?
Yeah.
You are trying to avoid a guy having to sit with fouls because he fouls out. And in the meantime, you are guaranteeing
you're trying to
avoid.
You're trying to maximize the minutes of your impact players. So, yeah. No, I hear you. Let's get to the next call, Tim.
All right.
Took half the season, but Kerr finally learned an important lesson. You cannot close with Poole and loving Kuminga.
Ooh. We didn't talk about this directly. Donte closed. Donte and Kuminga closed.
One of those sits for Wiggins didn't close either because he's been bad. I was going to say one of those guys normally would sit for Wiggins.
Wiggins didn't close because he's currently sick. But
right, no, but I mean, even when a couple games ago, Wiggins didn't close because he's been awful.
Yeah, and maybe he was sick, to be fair. But I mean,
you mentioned earlier he has had a rough go the past.
His energy level, look, man, I'm getting over it, so I have empathy for.
Does Wiggins have a 1-year-old?
Yeah, he does.
Stuff like all right, maybe that explains it then.
But what I was gonna say is, Donte getting the chance to close. Do you think Steve's going to go to this more? Because to me, it felt like a coach saying, damn politics, I'm playing my best lineup for this matchup, which it was. Donte was playing better than Poole, and sometimes the matchup makes more sense to have kind of like the ball connector guy than another scorer out there.
Yeah, I mean, Donte, obviously, we mentioned it, had his career high in assists, had 12 points, was playing well defensively. I think that what has happened with Poole and his poor play this year, I don't think it has removed him from that discussion. I think it has removed his guarantee that he's going to close, even when he starts, even without Wiggins, as we saw tonight. I do still think he'll close sometimes, but I think it is, partially, as you mentioned, matchup dependent, but I think it's more game flow and how guys look dependent.
Yeah.
Jordan wasn't any good tonight, and Donte was. There you go. And Kuminga obviously was late. So I think it was as simple as that. And Looney wasn't an option because he'd fouled out.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. So,
but Lamb had some late minutes. That Poole didn't get.
I'm pro Lamb in the sense of,
how is that possible?
Look, he is who he is. I'm not going to blame him for the fact that the roster did not find a better player than him to play. I think he has exceeded your expectation.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure. He's also awful, but yes.
All right. Now, Tim, let's get to the next one.
Hey, guys, a long-time listener, haven't ever called in. But I do want to – I don't think this has ever been discussed, but I do want to talk about Mike Brown. Has his absence kind of changed the defense? Atkinson's taken over on that front, and he's a really good coach. But I do wonder I wonder how much the team is missing Mike Brown, and I wonder what your guys' thoughts are. Thanks.
It's an interesting thought. Yeah. I want Aaron, I want your thoughts on. Okay, so like think of this from like a big picture perspective. This is a very veteran coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Brown is an incredibly veteran coach. He left. How much of a gap do you think losing someone like that actually is versus this being the situation with the talent they have?
So there's no way to really know because we're not inside, those coaches' meetings and who handles what and how much of a loss it is.
I'm everywhere, but yeah.
But like with largely the same personnel, not entirely, but largely the same personnel, the team went from elite defensively to mediocre is being kind. Now, the league is somewhat different, right? Offense is up all over the place. But as far as, so I don't think the raw numbers of points per game matter all that much. But as far as the Warriors defense relative to the rest of the league, it's 12 or 15 places lower. And it's largely the same personnel. Otto's a good defensive player. GP2's an elite defensive player. But aside from that, like Donte's good. Kuminga should have a year of development. He's better than he was last year. Wiggins has fallen off a touch and hasn't been around as much. But the main loss, other than GP2, is Mike Brown. So how much? It seems like it has had a pretty negative effect.
Would Mike Brown have jumped in front of Jordan Poole to take the punch? And would that have saved the chemistry?
Yes. As a defensive drill, he would have called it taking a charge.
Does Mike Brown have that kind of lateral quickness?
Not anymore, no. But, everybody seems like him. And look, Sacramento's not great defensively, but they're pretty damn good.
That's actually my favorite part of it because, you and I are old enough to remember 2009.
Yes.
Which makes me feel old that there's people who don't. But his reputation back in the day of being uncreative offensively, of being like a defensive drill sergeant.
Yes.
It's really cool to see Sacramento be like literally the opposite of that.
Are they the most fun team in the? I think
they are.
I love watching Orlando, but them and Orlando are like the two most fun.
They have great energy. The ball hops. They put points on the board. And they win.
I kind of like the beam too. Is this a safe space to say that? It's corny, but I kind of like it.
I like it too. I'm pro Sac. I've always been a pro Kings guy. Until the Warriors get into some sort of death feud with the Kings, I'm not going to hate. So And that
No, and the
happened.
Warriors, by the way, Kings ownership would love this, but there is nobody the Warriors would rather see in the first round. That if it's like a 3-6 or 4-5, then the Warriors would sweep them.
There's no one in the West I'm concerned about in that first round matchup for the Warriors other than Denver. Denver would not be the ideal first round matchup, and that's not to say the Warriors wouldn't win it, but like you don't want the worst case scenario, right?
You want Memphis again, don't you?
I do, of course.
Yeah,
I think
would too.
I think they're soft, dude. I think they're suck.
Frauds.
I think they're a joke. I mean, like David Roddy might be their best player. I don't know. Now we're too far into potting and I'm just talking trash. Let's get to the last one, Tim.
So I was pretty sure my last call got completely cut off. So my hot take is that they can't sustain runs. They consistently go on, like they did to end this half, on a 14 to, I think it was 4 run, when it probably they had 2 wide open threes and they missed a free throw. So that's at least a 16, if not 17-point run that you go on to end the half. And instead of being only up by 1, you're up by at least 5, if we're being honest. And they just can't sustain
Tim, I'm
runs
confused.
like they used to be able.
The end of the third would disagree with that. Kuminga made 4 threes and Steph made a 3 in 2.5 minutes.
I feel like that call was from the middle of the second quarter. I don't know. Yeah. I feel confused.
Look, there's variance in 3-point shooting. So the Warriors are used to coming out in third quarters and Steph puts 4 threes on somebody's head and Clay makes a bunch. And Clay didn't shoot the ball well again today. And there you go. You miss a bunch of threes, you don't get runs.
Yeah, it happens. But feel free to call in at halftime anytime, guys. Don't worry about that. Aaron, my man, yes. I appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Warriors are 1 game above 500. Is this the game that turns the season around?
No.
Fuck off. All right.
Why? Is there any evidence? This is what they've been doing.
No, I mean, I've had you on 10 times this season, and at least 8 times we've had that conversation. And each time I've believed it deep in my heart. And they have come through 0 this time.
I do think this road trip is important for them, though.
It is. It is important for them, and we will get to it on a future episode. But I want one take from you before we go.
All right.
Because you're wearing a 49ers hat.
I am.
And the road trip starts Monday, but there's a game on Sunday that has precedent. How you feeling?
I mean, I'm like conditioned to be a negative fan in general. So I think the Niners, I've said since before the playoffs started that I thought the 49ers were going to lose to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm pretty terrified of some Jalen Hurts runs on keepers and RPO keepers. And I'm terrified that AJ Brown is going to get behind the secondary. But the Eagles can't stop the run. And frankly, the Niners have the best team in the NFL. I'm not fully sold on Purdy yet, other than he's not Jimmy G. He's better than Jimmy G, but he still makes me a little nervous. So I think the Niners are gonna win, but I'm not particularly confident.
I'm with you there. I'm throwing my prediction on this.
All
and
right.
I'm gonna have Tim edit it out if it doesn't happen. So
I'll go 28-24 Niners.
Ooh. I am going 23-17. I don't think they're covering the over. I think this is going to be a war. I think it's going to be uncomfortable. I think you're going to text me at one point during the game saying it's over and you're getting into the liquor. But the only thing I feel confident about, I just don't think we're hitting the over. But I think the Niners are winning. I think they're going to run down their throat.
Yeah.
I think Debo will have the play of the weekend.
Okay. I'm with it.
And as I've told you, we're deleting this if I'm wrong. So appreciate you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Have a great night, everyone. Have a great weekend.